If you are in the Zoom, all right, please in the chat, put your year, so your graduation year, and also add your position. So graduation year and positions in the chat are live on Instagram. Please hop on through Zoom so that you can see the PowerPoint presentation. All right, today's topic, we're going to go over how to train, how to recover, and we're also going to be talking about confidence. And all of them are going to tie in to each other. All righty, let's dive into it. So I do have a Q&A coming out at the end. So any questions you guys have, I would put it down on a notebook. One thing to note, and if you are here, first off, thank you for being here. All right, whether you are live through Instagram or you are on Zoom, the fact that you're here means that you're trying to develop. All right, one thing that you could be doing throughout this segment is having a sheet of paper, a notebook with you. Anytime I go and I have a conversation with somebody, I bring a pen and paper. Reason why is because anything that somebody says that I learn, it's hard for us to remember the different lessons and things that we're learning in that very moment. So when we are in a conversation and we have a pen and paper next to us and we're able to write down different notes as they're coming in, that's a repetition. There's no difference between a writing repetition and a strength rep of a squat or a rep of a drill. There's no difference. It's just writing, being able to take in something that somebody else says, be able to take in lesson, putting it down on a sheet of paper. That's going to help you remember it. All right, so I put together a little bit of a PowerPoint. I don't want to be too long. I know obviously it's a Tuesday. I know you guys don't have school. So listen, I'm going to start doing more of these. So even if you miss today's, just know that there will be more coming down the line. All right, so foundations of sports performance. Again, if you are joining us through live and you want to follow us along on the PowerPoint presentation, in my Instagram story, you'll be able to see a live Zoom link. All right, so just join up through there. Foundations of sports performance. All right, so today I really want to go into how to train, how to recover, and how to improve your confidence. All of them work together hand in hand. All right, so think about like training, recovery, confidence as if they were all holding each other's hand within a circle. They all play a role in each other's development. If you gain confidence, you're going to train more consistently. If you're training hard, you're going to want to focus more on your recovery. If you're recovering well, then you're going to train harder and you're going to feel more confident because you won't be in pain. All right, so they all work hand in hand. All right, so we'll start off with how to train. How to train, and this is standard. And again, like I just got recertified through ISSA, and this is something that they actually talked about within my training. So they were talking about how there's three facets of training. You have endurance training, you have strength training, and you have power. A really good training program has a mix of all three of those. So if you're on a training program and let's say they're just doing strength movement, well, you're missing out on two other areas of training that are really important for your development. It needs to be a mix of training, endurance, strength, and power. And how you do that, like if I was starting off with an athlete, I might really try to focus on their endurance first. How's it going, Caleb? I might start on their endurance first so that they could start to build a solid foundation of strength. Then you want to move into strength building. So once they build that solid foundation of strength through endurance training, then you go into strength building. And it's really just the rep scheme. So when you're thinking about reps, think of endurance, you're doing reps of say 10 to 15. Strength, 6 to 10. Power, 3 to 5. All right. And that's how you're switching up the rep scheme. And now, as a lacrosse athlete, and it's really any athlete, even if you play tennis, there's still explosive power that's coming through playing tennis. You need to have a mix of all three in your training program. And if you're a lacrosse athlete listening to this, think about why you might need endurance. You need to be able to run up and down the field consistently. You need to be strong so that when somebody makes contact with you, you're able to have balance and stability. You need to be able to explode and have explosive power so that when you go to take a shot or you go to throw a check, you have some ability to explode with force. Then there goes into bilateral and unilateral movement. And again, if you guys have questions, just wait until the very end. I will be doing a Q&A, and you could do that whether you're on live or whether you're on Zoom.
All right, bilateral and unilateral movements. Bilateral movements is like a squat and a deadlift. Think about how your feet are like this. All right, they're even with each other. That's a bilateral movement. A unilateral movement is when they're staggered. So you have one foot in front, one foot behind. As an athlete, you need a mix of both. And this is stuff like if you've been following me on social media for quite some time, this is stuff that I talk about is you need to have a mix of bilateral movement because it's good for developing overall strength. But then you want to have unilateral movement because what the unilateral movement is doing is it's taking that strength that you're building and it's putting it into athletic style movement. So there's a mix of both that needs to be done in a training program. The issue that I find with a lot of training programs that I see, and it was something that even for me throughout my collegiate experience in high school, a lot of high school and college athletes are on programs that are only focusing on bilateral movements. And bilateral movements are good because yes, you're going to be building strength, you might be getting bigger, but the problem is that if you're always doing bilateral movements and you're not doing unilateral movements, you're developing imbalances within your body. Reason why is because who here and within the chat, who here is a righty dominant player? Righty dominant. That means you kick with your right foot. That means you might throw with your right foot. If you're playing lacrosse, you throw with your right foot. Who's a righty dominant player? I got one or two of us saying that righty dominant players. If you're a righty dominant player or lefty, when you're doing a bilateral movement, that leg or that arm is going to activate more often than the other side because it's your dominant leg and it makes sense. So that's why incorporating unilateral movement is important for athletes because it's helping you maintain balance between both your right and your left side. You want to improve your athletic performance, balance is key. So making sure that if you're going to split the body in half, you want to have your right and your left side somewhat even. Is it ever going to be fully even? Probably not. You probably will never have a fully even right and left side. If you're just joining, hello. Is that I think I spoke to you before. Guys, if I'm on, so if you're just joining the live, I am on Zoom. If you guys want to join up on the Zoom so you could see the PowerPoint presentation, that would be helpful. All right, but right and left side, you want to have them as balanced and even as possible. Then it cycles into building your kinetic chain. And again, if you've been following me on social media for quite some time, we talk about the importance of building the kinetic chain. Reason why I talk about it is that I wish when I was 13, 15, 20 years old that I was training my kinetic chain because the kinetic chain is what's allowing you to have the coordination between your upper and your lower body. And that's what you're doing when you're in athletics. For instance, I'm going to use this as an example. Everybody knows this exercise. Bicep curl. Bicep curl, right? We all love to do bicep curls. Now, the thing that is the issue with just bicep curl, that's an isolation movement. So if I'm just doing a bicep curl, isolation, I'm only working one muscle group. When you're trying to work on building your kinetic chain, it's being able to activate your lower and your upper body in unison. And I'm going to go over an exercise that does that. If you've seen landmines before on my social media, landmines are what we like to use to help build the kinetic chain. I also like to use cables. Reason why I use cables is because it's focusing on you moving your upper and your lower body at the same time. To go back to that reference with the bicep curl, if I'm just bicep curling, I'm not developing the coordination between my upper and my lower body extremities. Core stability, anti-rotation, and rotation. I can't tell you enough how important the core is for athletes, and especially for lacrosse athletes, because as a lacrosse player, you're so used to twisting. Twisting's part of the game. So whenever you're thinking of injury prevention, and this is something for me, like I've only learned through injuries, injury prevention, you want to do the opposite. So if I'm always twisting, the opposite of twisting is going to be anti-rotation or stability. So I'm going to show you guys a couple exercises that I like to use that focus on this. And again, if you guys are joining us on live and you want to join the Zoom, you'll be able to see kind of what we're looking at here. If you're an But a couple exercises that I like to use that focus on both my unilateral development and core stability. So this is one of my favorites. Reason why I like this exercise is because it's mimicking the exact movement that we're making when we're sprinting. And what happens is that we're so used to moving so fast. And when we're moving so fast, oftentimes we're doing movements or we're doing sprints and we have muscle groups that aren't even active or functioning. So that's why when you do strength training, when you're strength training, that's you being able to connect mind to muscle and allowing them both to function at the same time. If you create mind muscle connection over time, that mind muscle connection that you're creating throughout your kinetic chain is then like when you're thinking about performance, you're thinking about becoming faster. Think about you have 90 muscles. Let's say you have 90. There's more than 90 muscles in your body, right? But let's say you have 90 muscles in your body. You want all 90 to be active and functioning at the same time in unison. Most athletes have like say 30 functioning at once. And then sometimes we might feel like our legs are heavy or like we're a little bit slower, but a lot of times it's because we have muscles that aren't active and engaged. And that's why it's important that we work on muscle activation, but that's going to be something later down the line that I go over as well. All right, again, core stability. All right, so something as simple as this, training the hip flexors in flexion is something that's really beneficial for athletes. And again, I didn't really know this until later on in my development, and I wish I had known it sooner. Because oftentimes, like right now, if you're sitting right now while you're watching this, our hip flexors, which are right up here, are tight. They're shortened. A tight muscle needs to be stretched, right? But it also needs to be, what's up, Andre? Also needs to be strengthened. So when a muscle is strengthened, then it's able to elongate. If you have, let's say you have hip flexion, right? You have hip flexion. If your hip flexor is tight, if you stretch it, you're going to in the short term relieve the tightness of the muscle in the short term. In the long term, though, if you want to improve long-term flexibility over time, it's about strengthening the muscle so you can build it. So in this exercise, we're focusing on a knee drive, which is going to be building the hip flexor muscle so that we could then stretch it afterwards. Another thing that I want to show, the landmine. When I tell you every single athlete should be training from the landmine, the reason why, number one, the offset in weight. So in this exercise, and again, if you're live, you can't see the exercise. I wish you guys would join the Zoom. But if you're here, I have the weight in my right side. Since the weight's in my right side, it's forcing me to stabilize and activate the opposite. So in this case, the left side. As I drive up, now I'm getting rotation. Now notice, I'm bringing my hand up to my shoulder and I'm taking a step with my right leg. When you're sprinting, and if I'm running and my right leg is in front when I'm running, my left arm is coming forward and I'm slightly twisting into the rep. So that's what you see here when you're doing landmines and you're building your kinetic chain is you're working on your kinetic chain through movement patterns that are simulating exactly what you're doing on the field. So I love this. Like if you're an offensive guy or even if you're a defensive guy, like I like to think of this is like shooting on the run or it's like flipping your hips open for the answer shot. All right. So like I love this because it's naturally having me flip my hips open and then rotating into the barbell on the opposite side. If you're a defensive midfielder, and again, I play defense, I love to throw the club check. This is the same exact thing as a club. And I actually like to use this now for my boxing training because it's the same exact thing as when I used to throw the club when I played. So flipping the hips open, rotating, and then pressing. You only get this movement through using the landmine. And it might be challenging to do this movement right away. And that's why it's important that you start with the basics. So here, I'm going to show the basics and what I first started to use when I first started doing landmine stuff. So here, and Andrew, I believe I probably have this in your program, to be honest. But here, we're starting with one leg in front. So we got our right leg in front, left leg's behind. As I jump and twist, I'm pulling this left hand up to my shoulder. This movement right here is the same exact movement you're going to be in when you're sprinting. It's the same movement. No difference. But now you're working on balance, you're working on stability, and then you're also working on building your explosive power through the movement. So like if you're somebody that, let's say, trained power cleans before, I would choose this over a power clean any day of the week. And the reason being is because it's putting you in that athletic position. All right, next, we're going to rotate into how to recover. And this is a big one. All right, again, when we're thinking of recovery, I can't tell you enough. Recovery is actually more important than your training in general. Recovery is everything. And this is what I don't think enough coaches or people talk about the importance of recovery. And yet, it's one of the most important things when you're thinking about improving your performance. If you're showing up to practice every single day, let's say you're showing up to practice every day, you're showing up to lift, you're already working hard. You're a hard worker. You start adding in recovery to the mix. Now imagine yourself playing at, let's say you have percentages. You want to play at 100% every practice. The more you focus on recovery, the more you're able to play at your top performance in practice. If you could play at your top performance in practice, play like it's a game, then when you enter into the game, it's no difference than your practice. That's the goal. The goal is to train at your max potential every single day so that you can start to speed up your growth process. Guys, if you're joining through Zoom and if you're joining through the story and you want to follow us on Zoom, the link is in my my Instagram story. All right, so how to recover: hydration, nutrition, and your sleep. What's up? Hydration, nutrition, your sleep. This is everything. Foundation. You know what's funny about this? It's fully in your control. So your hydration, your nutrition, your sleep is fully in your control. And I'm sure a lot of us are listening to this like, oh, hey, I know that already. I know your hydration's important. I know your nutrition's important. I know your sleep is important. It's one thing to know, it's another thing to do. So the fact that we know that, it's like, okay, now I have to take consistent action and make sure I'm doing it consistently. And then what that actually looks like. When you think about your hydration, most of us are hydrating with water. Great. When I first started my fitness journey, I was hydrating with water and water alone. The only problem is that when you're just hydrating with water and water alone, and you're not including electrolytes, and if you want to know what electrolyte is, that's salt, potassium, magnesium. If you're just drinking and hydrating with water alone, and you don't have that salt, potassium, magnesium, the water's just flowing through you. You need the salt, potassium, magnesium in order for your muscle to absorb the water. The muscle has to absorb the water. If it doesn't have those electrolytes in it, again, salt, potassium, magnesium, the water is not going to be able to absorb in your muscle. And when you think about muscle, your muscle's made 70% water. 70%. And on a hot day, so obviously it's the summer, and over here in Cincinnati, it's super humid. We're losing a lot of electrolytes, salt, potassium, magnesium. If you get anything out of this, I'm telling you, when I started to hydrate with salt, potassium, magnesium, it made a world of a difference. Guys, if you want to follow along on Zoom, it's in my Instagram story. I have a slideshow presentation going on here, and you could actually see a little bit what I'm talking about. myofascial release and foam rolling and mobility. So likewise, so we were talking about electrolytes, right? Electrolytes are allowing our muscle to absorb the water. Myofascial release and foam rolling is breaking the muscle tissue up and making it more permeable. So like this goes back into science. Like if you guys really enjoy science and science is like your thing, well, permeability, the ability for it to pass through, when you do myofascial release and foam rolling, you're breaking up the muscle tissue. So it's allowing your muscle to absorb water because it's making it more permeable. What's up, and Justin? Making it more permeable. So I can't tell you enough the importance of myofascial release and foam rolling. I'll kind of go over that in a brief second after we go over carbohydrates and proteins and fats. All right, or you know what? I'll actually show that now.